All right, very briefly, my name is Carmine Nogara. I'm with Fairleigh Dickinson University, and we just make sure we're good. Yeah. Two colleagues of
It's working. The screen is working. Oh, nice.
yeah.
Okay,
Oh, there it goes.
it's gonna take some time.
So a few colleagues of mine working on a paper, fraud detection. One of my colleagues, Dr. Vijay, actually developed a program to help businesses more effectively and efficiently detect fraud. And it's a machine learning program. So just get started here and
It's working.
oh, that'll work.
Yeah, just
Oh.
this one.
Just arrows, good. Okay, we just these stats are pretty new. The ACFE is the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, and their most recent report attributes over $5 trillion in fraud each year. That's a lot of money. I questioned my colleague, and well, both of my colleagues working on the report, and they're both members of the ACFE. I'm not. So they said, no, these numbers are good. So that's a hefty price that companies have to deal with when it comes to fraud. In addition to that, there are other costs, reputation, and of course, market price, loss of capital, that are all intrinsic when there are even small fraud cases with firms. So a little bit of background about what we're doing. And nowadays in accounting, we use the term big data, and just the sheer number of transactions that even a small business will process, and the complexity of these transactions are really, we rely on computing, and without it, I don't know where we'd be. In fact, I was going through, I ran a tax and accounting firm for a number of years. So I was going back to actually when I started the firm in the mid-1980s, and all of the tax returns, guess what? Were done manually. And my students, I brought in my own return, which I was eager to show them how much money I was making back then. And they were all amazed how, wow, you did all of these manually. Nowadays, even for the most simplest business, we process data. And a big part of what we're looking at is that how can our system be more efficient, and how can it learn from itself? So the whole theme of this conference is artificial intelligence. And I think we use the term a little too liberally. I think machine learning may be a better term, but it's all semantics. So I'm just gonna move quickly here. And so what we're doing is we set up a fictitious company, actually, and we implemented data onto it's a proprietary software package. And as we entered more data in, the program, it actually learned from prior transactions, and which it made identifying transactions. We input fraudulent transactions. That was the fun part. I get to pick fraudulent transactions, and we input those into the system, and it got better at identifying. It's a rules-based type package, meaning that we set up a certain amount of criteria, and then if one of the flags would come up, for example, if there was a transaction over a certain dollar amount, that may trigger you know, this is a possible fraudulent activity. And then we set up a scoring system. And, you know, as we found, the more data that we input, the more accurate it was in identifying the transactions. So I'm just going to issue that companies have with fraud, and this is a big issue, is how much do they invest in detecting fraud? Now, of course, they can't ignore the issue. It's out there. Every business has controls. But do they go too far? And I'll give you an example. I sit on the board of a local nonprofit, and we had to make a quarterly tax payment. It was a large dollar amount, so I, as treasurer and co-chair of the board, I had to sign off on the check. A couple days later, I got a call from the bank saying, "Did you write this check for X dollars?" And I said, "Yes, it was me." And they said, "Okay, we're just checking." And then I spoke with the clerk for a minute, and she says, "The reason why we made this call is because it was above a certain dollar amount. And that triggered our investigation. We wanted to be sure if it was fraud or not." And I said, "Oh, that's good." And I was happy. But taking a step back, this could be pretty costly if they had many of these cases to investigate. And it turns out, and according to one source you can see on the bottom there, when firms investigate certain cases, they use the term false positives. If you'll hear earlier, the morning speaker mentioned false positives, and according to this research report, there's 100-to-1 ratio. So most of these transactions they investigate turn out to be false. And the downside is it does, when it comes to human observation, this costs money, employee time, and so on. So the system, and I'm just going to scroll through this. The system that we implemented it's considered a rules-based system. So we set up a few rules of what we would consider suspicious transactions. They could be based on an intercompany transaction if a firm has affiliate. Yeah. Okay. They could be based on a number of different instances, and it generated a scoring mechanism to score each transaction based on the degree of likelihood that fraud could exist. Again, with the goal in mind, balancing the amount of human intervention needed, you know, to investigate each case. And I'm just going to skip over this. And our paper, what we're doing is, in accounting, it's very important to keep documentation of an entire process. So what we're doing is really what method, how should we document how a business is looking into uncovering fraudulent transactions. So we use, and I'll just pull up the next slide, probably the standard that many firms use is called BPMN, Business Process Modeling Notation. This is just a crude diagram, and it took me about 20 minutes to do. There's free software out there, and I'm pretty challenged. Some of the younger people here could probably do it in a lot less. But this just illustrates a typical process of a business when it comes to detecting fraud. And the nice thing about the model we're using is it could be tailored to any firm. So if you have a business in a certain industry, certain transactions will be more likely to be considered suspicious. So then you could build in pretty much anything there. And our findings were based on the data that we ran through, was that, yeah, this pretty much works in reducing the amount of human intervention, and having adequate documentation is really a key aspect in the whole process. So I'm going to stop on that. Does anyone have any questions or?
Do you think that like AI, that fraud detection will become much easier in like the near future with more transactions, happening over time?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And with just the number of transactions and the volume that get processed, think about a bank, for example. And yeah, having AI will certainly reduce the amount of human intervention that's needed to investigate every transaction. So that's the trend that most organizations have been, using, and they're placing more of an emphasis on it, yes. Okay.
Have there been any ethical or legal issues with the data that was used to train the machines to detect fraud?
The answer is not, that shouldn't be a problem. The data we use was considered, it was actually, we got it from the Association of Fraud Examiners. And it was really, it was 30 years old. We used the data to run it through. But in real life, a firm would use their own past data. So it's their own data. It's not like they're going to use outside sources, because every business is unique and they'll have their own type of transaction. So yeah, in practice, no, I would say that wouldn't be an issue. That's a good question. Okay, well, thank you.